A government office, 1983. Fluorescent lights, gray metal desks, a manila folder marked for restricted eyes only. An Army intelligence officer opens it and starts to read. And it's not a weapons report. It's not foreign troop movements. It's a step-by-step explanation of how a human being can leave their own body, drift across the planet without moving an inch, and slip outside of time itself. The document is real. It carries a signature and a date. And for 20 years, the most important page in it, the one that explained how a mind escapes time, was simply gone. Blank space where the secret should have been. This is the story of the gateway process. And the part that should keep you up at night isn't that the government wrote it. It's that you can read almost all of it tonight. Let's go back to the beginning. In the early 1980s, the United States Army had a unit called INSCOM, the Intelligence and Security Command. Serious people doing serious work. Signals, codes, threat analysis, the quiet machinery of the Cold War. Not the kind of organization you'd expect to take an interest in out-of-body travel. And yet, in 1983, that's exactly what happened. Army intelligence formally asked for an evaluation of something called the Gateway Experience. They wanted to know whether it was real, whether it worked, and whether it could be useful. So what was it? It came out of the Monroe Institute, founded by a man named Robert Monroe. Monroe had been a successful radio executive, a businessman, not a mystic, until he started having spontaneous experiences of leaving his body at night, floating above himself, moving through walls, traveling to places he had no way of seeing. Instead of checking himself into a hospital, he began to study it. He built a research center in the hills of Virginia and developed a tool to trigger those experiences on purpose. That tool was sound, an audio technique the Institute called hemisync, short for hemispheric synchronization. It works like this. Play one steady tone into the left ear, a slightly different tone into the right, and the brain does something strange. It tries to reconcile the difference, and in doing so, produces a third rhythm, a beat that exists only inside your own head. The claim was that, with the right frequencies, you could coax the two halves of the brain into syncing up. And in that state, the Institute said, the mind could do things it normally can't. The Army wanted that evaluated by a professional, and the job landed on the desk of one man, Lieutenant Colonel Wayne M. McDonnell, United States Army. In June of 1983, McDonnell produced a document 29 pages long with a plain, bureaucratic title, Analysis and Assessment of the Gateway Process. This is the crucial thing to understand. It's not a rumor whispered on a message board. It's a typed, signed, dated United States government document written by a named officer for a real military intelligence command. Everything about it looks like 10,000 other dull federal reports. And then you read what it says. Because McDonnell did not write a polite dismissal. He took it deadly seriously. He set out to explain, in the calm language of an official assessment, how the human mind could step outside the body and outside of time. Using the hemisync tones, the report says, a person enters an altered state, and what they report is extraordinary, separating from the physical body, perceiving things across cities, across countries, without leaving the chair, and further still, moving beyond ordinary time, where past and future stop behaving the way we think they do. But the part that has haunted readers for 40 years is how it explains reality itself. McDonnell describes the universe not as solid matter, but as something closer to a hologram, a vast pattern of vibrating energy. And he argues that human consciousness is also a pattern of energy, vibrating at its own frequency. If both the universe and your mind are made of the same fundamental stuff, waves, frequencies, oscillation, then the right state of mind could let you tune into the larger pattern, like a single radio finally picking up every station at once. If that was all it was, a colonel writing poetry about energy and vibrations, it would be easy to wave away. What makes the report genuinely unsettling is that McDonnell didn't write it as poetry. He dressed it in hard science, real names. He reached into quantum mechanics, the bizarre physics of the very small, where particles behave like waves, where a thing can be in two places at once, where the act of observing something changes what it does. He drew on a scientist and inventor named Itzhak Bentov, who had written about consciousness as vibration, the body and brain as resonating systems tuned to certain frequencies. And then he reached for the biggest idea of all, the holographic model of the universe. This wasn't fringe nonsense. It came from serious, respected physicists. David Bohm, who had worked alongside Einstein, had proposed that the universe we see is like a projection, that underneath the world of separate objects, there's a deeper, unbroken order where everything is connected. And Carl Pribram, a respected neuroscientist, had proposed that the human brain itself might store and process information holographically. Put those two together, a holographic universe and a holographic brain, and you arrive at the chilling conclusion at the heart of the report. If reality is a hologram and your mind is a hologram, then the line between out there and in here might be an illusion, and in the right state, you might be able to cross it. That's what made the document dangerous to dismiss, not the claims about floating out of your body, but that a military officer had wrapped those claims in the language of Nobel-level physics and handed it to Army intelligence as a serious assessment. And here's where the story takes its strangest turn. In 2003, the CIA declassified the report. It was released, scanned, and eventually found its way online, where anyone with an afternoon could read what the Army had once kept behind locked doors. Except they couldn't read all of it. Because when people worked their way through the pages, following McDonnell's argument as it built toward its climax, the body, the brain, the hologram, the escape from time, they reached page 25, and it wasn't there. Page 25 was missing, and of all the pages to vanish, it was the one that mattered most. Because page 25 was the section explaining how consciousness moves beyond time, the exact mechanism, the how. The report had been walking you, step by step, toward the single, most extraordinary claim a government document has ever made, and at the threshold, the page was simply gone. You've followed a United States Army colonel through quantum physics and holographic universes toward the promise that he's about to explain how a human mind escapes time, and the document hands you a blank where the answer should be. For years, that gap fueled everything. Was it removed on purpose, the one piece the public should never see, or lost in some clumsy photocopying job decades ago, a national mystery created by a jammed machine? Nobody could say. It was only much later that page 25 was finally recovered and added back. And when people read it, they found McDonnell's dense, strange reasoning about consciousness, energy, and what he called the absence of time in that deeper state. The mind, freed from the body's frequency, no longer bound to the steady tick of past into future. But by then, the damage to our peace of mind was done, because a question had taken root that the recovered page could never kill. If this was all harmless theory, why did the most important page disappear in the first place? And here's the thing that stops you from filing the Gateway report under Weird One-Off. It did not exist in a vacuum. Around the very same time, the CIA and the Army were running another program, one we now know as Stargate. For roughly 2 decades, the United States government quietly funded psychic spies, people trained in remote viewing, the supposed ability to close your eyes in a room in Maryland and describe a secret facility on the other side of the planet. Soviet submarine bases, hidden weapon sites, hostages. The program had code names, budgets, real intelligence officers, and real assignments. So the Gateway report wasn't a daydream one colonel typed up and forgot. It sat inside a much larger, much longer effort by the most powerful intelligence apparatus on Earth to find out whether the human mind could do things our science says are impossible. They funded it for years, which means someone with security clearance and a budget looked at all this and decided it was worth the money to keep looking. And that's the question that lingers, not whether some people believe in out-of-body travel. People have believed that for thousands of years. The question is why the United States military and the CIA believed it was worth studying, formally in writing, with real physics and real names attached. Maybe McDonnell was a brilliant man swept up in beautiful ideas that don't hold together. Maybe it was taxpayer money chasing a dream through the fog of the Cold War. When both sides were terrified, the other had found some impossible edge. Maybe the gateway tapes do nothing but relax you with a strange humming sound. Or maybe a colonel in 1983 wrote down something true about the nature of reality, of time, of the mind. And the only mercy is that most of us will never sit still long enough to find out, because that's the part that should follow you out of this room. The Gateway Report is real. It was written, classified, declassified, and it is sitting out there right now, all 29 pages, page 25 and all. No lock, no clearance required. The instructions the Army once studied for stepping outside of space and time are simply available, waiting. The only thing standing between you and whatever McDonnell was describing is whether you'd be willing to put the headphones on. So I'll leave you with the question. Do you think the CIA actually found a crack in space and time, a real seam in reality their best minds stumbled into? Or did they spend years and tax dollars chasing a beautiful dream through the dark? And the harder question, knowing what's on those pages. Would you ever put on the gateway tapes yourself, lie back in the dark, and see how far your own mind is willing to go? Tell me what you think happened, and if you want to keep walking into the cases the world can't explain, stay with me here in the dark. There are more of these waiting. There always are.